Okay. Chapter 16, Style and Delivery in Public Speaking. So just an overview, the things you want to kind of keep an eye on here. You want to make sure that you're going to be choosing the words to add clarity, vividness, appropriateness, personal style, and forcefulness to your speeches, and phrase sentences effectively. So what you want to do is you want to practice full, complete sentences where it sounds like you have rehearsed this and it seems fluid, it seems natural. Rehearse your speech effectively and efficiently. Um, time yourself, of course, but also I would suggest that you videotape yourself instead or video yourself instead of just practicing in front of a mirror, and do so using your PowerPoints at the same time. This will help you with your timing. It's going to help you with how you want to keep things going, and it's going to make it feel more natural when you're actually giving the speech itself. You want to make sure that you're going to be presenting that speech with effective voice and bodily action. I want you guys making sure that you're using tone and style. Okay, I want you to use diction. Make sure that you're using appropriate wording, uh, inflection. I want to hear your voices turn up at key moments, emphasize specific things. Unlike an essay that gives you this ability to go out and bold text or use italics, right? You don't get that option with public speech, with a speech. You have to be able to stand up and um, give those inflections and bold things, or even highlight things and, put it in big red content letters and things like that. You have to be able to do that uh, colloquially through your voice as you speak with people. So make sure that you give and receive criticism positively and with a view toward improvement. Okay, nobody's out trying to destroy you. Nobody's out trying to hurt you. And you guys have been really receptive to criticism. Criticism is your friend. We've given criticism this really um, nasty um, kind of demeanor in society, and it's not necessarily supposed to be that way. Criticism is actually meant to be a good thing. It's meant to help build, help construct, to help make something better. And then you want to make sure that, again, with the diction, you're choosing words that are clear. You want to make sure that you are being economical with your words, right? Sometimes it's not a matter of being too short or too long. You have to find a balance, okay? You have to be able to float that line between long and short wording. And the same thing happens in a standard essay, and you're going to see a lot of crossover here with essays. When people are going out and they're speaking, you don't want it all to be just long-winded, big sentences using words that are just out of this world. Okay, you want to make sure that you understand your audience. Your audience does. You will need to, of course, some of those words are going to help to affect ethos. You want to make sure that you're using those, but at the same time, don't make it all about that, because sometimes that just feels like you're speaking over someone, and people hate that. We've all talked about this. There's this huge movement of anti-intellectualism going on right now, and we do not want to feed into that. So make sure that you are balancing between heavy jargon and clear wording. And if you use jargon that is specific to your area or your field, be sure that you um, elaborate on that with your audience, okay? Because they're not all going to be content or subject matter experts. Be sure that be sure that you're also using specific numbers. Okay, so it's not enough to go in and say, oh, there's a lot of people that are having these kinds of feelings about this and this. No, we want you to be specific. How many people? What exactly are you talking about? If you're talking about um, forest fires, I want to hear specific numbers. I've heard students come out and say, yeah, we've had an increase in fires this year compared to last year, and then leave it at that. That's not enough. Okay, we need to know what those numbers are. And the reason why is because it makes people, one, it's going to give you an idea of how big that separation is. And two, a lot of us don't realize how many fires are the normal, right? So maybe establish those kinds of things. Make sure that you're using signposts. Who here knows what a signpost is? Come on now, we talked about this.
Drawing a blank.
Same.
That's okay. So signposting. Signposting lets me know where you are in your speech, right? It's a transition within a speech. So you know how you have transition sentences and paragraphs? It's the same thing with a speech, but the difference is that we make it a little bit more clear. So you could say at the end of a speech, in conclusion, we were going to talk, we have talked about this, and this, and we've covered this. Signpost help put us in this area where we know, what is happening and when it's happening. So signposting in all these different areas is very important. Um, all right. Make sure that you're using short, familiar words mixed in with your jargon. And if you do use jargon, make sure that you define the jargon within the context of what you're talking about. So make sure that you understand who the audience is. They need to be familiar with what you're speaking about, okay? And carefully assess idioms. Assess anything that you're going to be thinking about when it comes to, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute, any kinds of metaphors or things that you may want to come out. Make sure that you understand not everyone in that department or in that audience may come off with that understanding of what that idiom means. So be precise, be clear, make sure that they understand what you're talking about, culturally and just regionally. Idioms that I grew up with in Georgia are going to be completely different than some idioms that you guys grew up with here in the UP. So make sure that you understand your audience, and make sure that they need to understand that, or they are going to have to understand these idioms that you may have to use, okay? When you're choosing words, you want to make sure that you're looking at vividness. And vividness is going to be, make sure that you're using active verbs as much as possible. Now, not entirely the whole time. Anybody know what an active verb is? What is, let's say it like this. What's active voice?
Describing something you're doing.
Yeah, it is. It's describing something you're doing or have done or something like that. So you have two forms here. You have active and you have passive voice. Anybody want to take a stab at what active and versus passive is? It's okay if you don't know. So active voice is going to be typically words that are going to show the sentence doing something. Passive voice is going to be more of this, I did this, I am doing this. Passive runs with what we call to be verbs, the long forms of the verbs. Whereas active voice is going to be something like, Instead of saying, I am shooting my bow into the target, right? That is all passive. You could say, I shot the bow into the target. I shoot the bow into the target. These are all active voice. So instead of using, and the reason why is because it's for two reasons. One, it makes the subject matter more interesting to come from an active voice. And two, because active voice will typically be a more concise sentence when you're speaking in these terms. It's the same way when you build a resume, right? When you build your resumes, you look to formulate that in active voice as much as possible. The problem is if you start to try to use too much active voice, it'll start to sound like this, like you're on Game of Thrones or something. And you don't want that weird feeling. So you want to make sure that you are balancing a couple of passive statements in there if you can. Active voice is great, and we really want that in there, but balance it. Okay. Make sure that you're using very strong verbs, verbs that aren't just utilize or uses, right? Good grief. I'm guilty of that too. Stay away from use and utilize if you can. Try to think of more powerful, stronger verbs. Okay. Verbs paint pictures. We want you to do that. All right. Be creative in your verbs. Using figures of speech. Alliteration, antithesis, hyperbole, irony, metaphor, metonymy, personification, rhetorical question, simile, synecdoche, oxymoron. These are all very sophisticated forms of speech. There is a great website out there. It's called Silva Rhetorica. It is SILVA Rhetorica, and it's going to be RHETORICAE, that weird AE. And it is a great website that will go in and break up all these different figures of speech, and they are amazing if you can learn to master them. Things like alliteration. We know what alliteration is? Anybody who likes Taylor Swift? Taylor Swift loves alliteration.
It's like sentences where each word starts with the same letter.
Yeah. What was that one song she did? And I only heard the one voice. My daughter listened to it. Band-Aid on a bullet wound or something like that. Anyway, it's a hot mess. I'm not a Taylor Swift fan. Anyway, when you've got that kind of thing going, alliteration works well in music. A lot of people use it. Things like synecdoche. Anybody ever hear that one? It's a weird one. That's where you have this word that represents a whole. So instead of the Cleveland Indians won, by 10 runs, right? Instead, somebody might say Cleveland won by 10 runs. Not the city of Cleveland, of course, but, the Cleveland Indians. And it's when we take something and we make it shorter and it represents a whole, right? Something similar to that. So other ones, personification, when you take inanimate objects and make them feel like, they've done action, rhetorical questions, metaphors are the most popular. So there are a lot out there. I strongly suggest that you guys go out and read these, look them up, find ways to implement them into your work. In fact, I'm thinking next semester during the rhetorical speech, I'm going to make some of these mandatory just because they're fantastic. They really are. Some of them are a little outdated. Some of them are certainly Shakespearean, but just go out and check them out. Also, you want to make sure that you're using imagery, visual, auditory, and tactile imagery. Okay, what do I mean by that?
Well, visual imagery, you're using pictures probably of whatever you're talking about.
You could use pictures, absolutely. But you also have to consider that these figures of speech will also help you create, that visual, auditory, tactile messaging, right? That imagery. So um, we've all heard of the metaphor or the simile, actually. The simile, he was like a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. This kind of stuff. It's um, or that guy was running like a scalded dog, right? We've heard of that. So these are similes that you know paint a picture, and they paint a picture for the audience. And there are some funny ones out there too. Don't shake your don't be afraid to employ a little bit of humor in there as well. Um, um, there are also some very negative, nasty, racial ones. Be very careful. Don't use those. Okay, you don't want to upset the audience. Make sure that they are clear and PC. Right? Any questions concerning figures of speech or choose your choice of words, vivid imagery? All right, moving on. Appropriateness. You want to make sure that you are speaking on an appropriate level of formality, right? If you are speaking to a group of your peers at a medical conference, be sure that you are speaking on that level of formality. If you're speaking to a group of kids for career day, you can be a little bit more lax with it. Sometimes crossing a little line or two here or there can be a great way to gain attention when you're talking about this. When you can cross that appropriate level of formality. Sometimes when you get in there with a lot of stuck-up doctors who want to, we're all talking about the same thing. A cool joke or being a little silly can sometimes really hit home. It can really it can really score. However, sometimes you could be met with crickets and a lot of people looking at you like you are just absolutely insane. Um, be very careful and judge your audience accordingly. Make sure that you know who your audience is going to be. If you're about to go in front of a group of people that you have never met before, it's better to play it safe than to be adventurous. Okay. Make sure that you avoid unfamiliar terms, especially when you're speaking at that career day for the kids. That might be a time where you want to avoid jargon altogether. All right. If you're speaking to a group of peers using jargon here and there, it's great. They're going to pick up on it. They're going to know what you're talking about. When you're in an intermediate audience or an audience, a general audience, if you use jargon, if you use words that are going to be unfamiliar to them, keep in mind that what is it that everybody always talks about? Common knowledge, right? Common knowledge is a matter of perspective, right? Common knowledge to me is not common knowledge to any of you, or your common knowledge of your field may not be common knowledge to me. Keep in mind that common knowledge is perspective. It's all based on perspective. If someone is, uh, be prepared to elaborate on your choice of wording and what you say to people within that group, right? Um, avoid slang. And yes, again, this is going to be one of those things where you want to gauge your audience. If your audience, um, if you're always looking for a way to connect with the audience, yeah? And if some slang term might connect with the audience and get a laugh or be of some kind of use, that's one thing. But avoid using derogatory slang. Avoid using slang that could jeopardize your ethos. What do I mean by that?
Your credibility.
What was that, Dane?
Credibility. Oh, you can hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you a little bit. You're a little quiet, but that's okay.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, don't do anything that's going to damage your credibility, right? So me using that simile of one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest probably wouldn't be the best thing to deploy at an amputee conference. You know, I know you guys are laughing, but I mean, but I'm serious. I mean, you might want to, you want to kind of like approach this stuff very, very carefully, right? So avoid slang and avoid slang that's going to be derogatory or make you look the fool. Okay. Um, avoid ethnic expressions, right? Generally, right? Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't even cross. I'm not even going to give you an example because I will be a dick. So don't do it. Don't cross into ethnic expressions at all. No similes, no metaphors. I don't care what you grew up with. Stay away from it. Stay away from it. Okay. You will get a laugh. I guarantee you, you'll get a laugh or two out of that audience if you try one. But I promise you, the damage it does will be worse. Okay. Any questions about choosing correct words and appropriateness? And moving on. Personal style. This is where you can let your own stuff out, okay? Make sure that you're using personal pronouns often, okay? And unlike when you're going out and you're giving an essay and you're saying, one must do this, one must do that. We do not do that in speech. We do not do that in public speaking. It distances us. Where a where a where an essay is, and don't get me wrong, you're supposed to remain objective within your speech to a certain extent as well. But where an essay is vehement uh, objective, right? We become subjective when we speak. So we want to put ourselves in that place. We want to use the I's and the me and the we and the us. We want to use that. Don't overuse it, but use it appropriately, right? Use personal pronouns to connect with your audience. It's all about audience connection. Use questions. Use questions to draw people in. Drawing people in and making them feel like they're a part of it, part of that speaking event, it makes it feel more conversational and it makes it feel more natural. So that's what I try to do with you guys. And I'm even trying to do it on Zoom. Zoom can make it a little difficult. I'm trying, right? And create immediacy. What do I mean by create immediacy?
Create urgence,
Yeah.
or get their, like, alarm them, something like that.
Yeah, you can alarm them. Creating a sense of urgency and alarm. Absolutely. That can create a sense of immediacy. But remember too that immediacy in this kind of form is going to be used as kind of like as a synonym for connectedness, right? So create an immediacy that feels connected. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are conveying information in a way, and the audience is participating, and everything feels like you're all connected. You want to make it feel immediate to everyone. You see what I'm saying? All right. When it comes to personal style, we all have our own quirks. We all have our own ways of being personal. Just understand that some of us are personally different. All right. So consider that. Consider how personal you are and play to it, but also make sure that you are distancing yourself a little from potentially your intimate personal nature. So it's almost like instead of thinking of this being you up there, this is your representative. You see what I'm saying? So make this your representative of that personality. So when it comes to forcefulness and power, You want to eliminate any kind of weakeners out of your speech or any kind of weakeners out of your presentation. Things like hesitations, where you may have sentence fillers, right? Those are going to be ums and likes and things like that. Be very careful with those. You want to try to make it feel powerful, because when it's forceful, when it's powerful, it feels natural. And that's what you're going for. You're going for that natural speaking ability. You're not trying to go up and look like you're giving a speech that somebody made you go up and stand and talk about, right? You want to go up and make this yours. So make sure that you are trying to make this as powerful as possible. And you need to vary your intensity, all right? Vary intensity as appropriate. So don't, stress specific areas. You shouldn't be this monotone dude or dudette just up there. This is the way that things are with the Himalayan salt lamp. And if you don't like it, I don't know what to tell you, but that's just what I feel. No, you gotta, the Himalayan salt lamp does this. It is this. This is what it does, right? Use that intonation. Try to intensify. Try to give a forceful, powerful presentation. You want people to be moved, right? It doesn't move someone. You can't move someone with monotone. You move them with passion. When you listen to music, you're not listening to music all at one level, right? It's not all one note. There are varying notes, and all these notes have different effects on the way you feel, on your psyche, on the way that you are going to, listen to that music, the way you participate in that music, right? It's the exact same thing with speech. Vary your intensity, vary your intonation, your volume. All these things are going to come into play, and it makes it more interesting. It pulls people in, and that's what you really want to do, okay? Also, avoid bromides and cliches, okay? Listen, try to be unique, all right? Try to be a snowflake. But I mean, try to be different. Don't just pull in cliche crap, because people will shut down with cliche. If it becomes one of a million, it gets drowned out. So avoid those at all costs. Any other questions going on? No? Raising sentences, we want to see you use short sentences, right? But I also want to see you alternate longer sentences in there. Nothing worse than a lot of short, choppy sentences. Well, other than a lot of long, drawn-out sentences. I want to see a mix. Use short sentences interwoven with longer speech, okay? Be direct. Use direct sentences. Get people's attention. You can ask questions. That's great. You want to draw people in, but be direct. All right? Be active when all possible. You want to stay away from, you want to use passive voice sparingly. Active voice should be your primary mode of transportation for your information, okay? And vary the types of use positive sentences. What do I mean by use positive sentences? What's the difference between a positive sentence and a negative sentence?
As in, like, your attitude towards the subject, or?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, absolutely. If you wanted to use a positive nature, absolutely, you could do that. But positive sentences are going to be more of a direct, this is how it is, as compared to this is how it is not, okay? This is how it is not is more of a negative kind of like, this. You want to build what it is over what it is not. See what I'm saying? I know that sounds weird. It sounds very philosophical, but it hits our brains in a certain way. Okay? Any other questions about that noise? Boom. When it comes to phrasing sentences, you also want to vary the types of sentences. Parallel, antithetical, periodic. It's the same thing as I said a minute ago, okay? Balance it out with simple sentences, compound sentences, compound complex sentences, complex sentences. Balance it out. Make it feel fluid. Speak like you do, uh, you know, naturally. Nobody just speaks all in short sentences, and no one just speaks all in long sentences, right? So consider that and practice that. So here's a little graph. And again, I'm going to try to put this up on the web. I've got this one saved into the cloud. I'm going to try to get this switched over for you guys onto Moodle. But here's a little graph for you to kind of some guidelines for your speech, okay, that you can just check out. Make sure that you're clarifying, using specific terms, signposts, short familiar terms, and watch out for those idioms. Vividness, use active and strong words and add figures of speech, use imagery. People love metaphor, simile. We love syllogistic logic is one of our favorite things. I mean, we remember the video that I showed of, Family Guy when Peter's in there and he's mixing his Red Bull, talking about the fuel and all that stuff. I thought that was kind of funny. Make sure that it's appropriate. Very formality is appropriate. Avoid unfamiliar slang and ethnic expressions. Avoid ethnic expressions at all costs. Unless you're speaking on racism and you want to pull up some kind of but I wouldn't even feel comfortable doing it. Personal, use personal pronouns and questions to try to create this immediacy with the audience, this connectedness. And power, try to eliminate weakeners like sentence fillers. Try to vary the intensity. Try to vary your volume and your intonation and all that good stuff. In fact, I would suggest that when you go out and you do an outline for your speech, feel free to use bold and italics within your speech just as reminders to set you off, right? So if you want to go in and you want to add a bold text or something within your speech or put it on your cue card or whatever that you're going to be reading from, put it in bold, put it in italics. That way you'll know that you can change your inflection at that point, okay? And avoid cliches. Nobody likes them, all right? Okay. Next, I want to make sure that you guys are rehearsing your speech. What do I mean by rehearse your speech as a whole?
The speech altogether.
Yes, ma'am. What do you mean by that? Tell me about that.
Like going through the whole thing, making
Yep.
sure you understand what each part you're talking about is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What else? Anybody else?
Recording yourself, then critiquing yourself.
Absolutely. Recording yourself and critiquing yourself. Like I've said before, standing in front of a mirror is one thing, but that is this sort of instant recognition. And if you're not good with instant recognition, it can be a detriment. Recording yourself allows you to go back and say, I don't like the way I hit this. I don't like the way that this hit. It gives you a chance to go back and see in perspective how things are going. It's the same thing in football, you don't have, sure, you have a couple of players who go on the sideline, man, I can't believe I did it like this. I can't believe I did it like that. I got to start thinking about it this way. But then they'll go back and they watch the tapes, right? They go back and they watch the tapes, and that's how they find out how to do it differently. And the same thing is going to happen with a speech, right? You can always say, I didn't like something the way it came out in that mirror. But when you go and you watch tapes, you think of new ways to approach it. Okay. So tape yourself, video yourself. What else? How else can we talk about rehearsing a speech as a whole? Maya, you're dying. I know you want to say something.
Practice it with your visual aid.
Bam! That's what I was looking for. Absolutely. Practice with your visual aid. Practice it exactly as you would within a specific setting, as best as you can. If you have the ability to hit that classroom or to hit that conference room before other people can get in there, that's a boon. That's what you want. That is ideal. To be able to go in there and do what you got to do. You can put that speech up there, that PowerPoint up there on the wall. You can sit at the back of the classroom or the back of the conference hall to see if they can read it. You can touch on all the points to rehearse that speech from the ground up, right? Practice it as a whole, because when you practice with your presentation aid and all this other stuff, your timing is going to be what you're nailing down, and you're going to find yourself having to look at that thing very, very much less, which is great. Always make sure that you're timing the speech. Okay, you want to make sure that you're on time, and you don't want it to feel rushed, right? Nothing worse than going up there for your speech, realizing, oh my God, I've only got a minute left. I just saw that guy's, third finger go up, and now third finger like this, right? I just saw that third finger go up, and now all of a sudden I've got to start trying to speak like, oh my God, and that stinks. Nobody wants that. Okay, it's bad for you, makes you feel uncomfortable, and for those of us listening to it, it's difficult, right? Because now all we can think about is how you are running behind. So make sure that you're timing that speech. You time it, and it should feel so natural and comfortable, and it should end when it means to. Okay? If it runs a minute over, that's fine. Approximate the actual speech situation. Again, if you can get your hands on that room or that conference room, that's the best way to do it. Also, do a little research or background check in who your audience can potentially be. If you're going to be going and giving a conference with a group of your peers, find out. It could be something similar to what I did in Toronto when I had to go up and I had to give a speech there. And sure, there were quite a few people who were interested in some of the things that I did, right? But I was also in there with a lot of philosophers. I was in there with people who had physics backgrounds, people who didn't necessarily know exactly what I was talking about, right? So I have to be careful with my choice of jargon. Just because they're educated, just because I'm in there with a group of smart people, doesn't mean that they necessarily know, what my field of study is. So I have to be careful with the use of jargon, and I have to be careful that I explain things in ways and how I came to these understandings, okay? See yourself as the speaker as you stand up there, okay? And again, when you start going and you videotape yourself, this is going to come out a little bit easier, all right? You want to make sure that you incorporate changes and make delivery notes. If you can, if it's a speech that you've given a couple of times, like in this class, you should have been making appropriate changes. You should have been making some delivery notes. And of course, I've been making some of these for you guys and telling you, hey, maybe check this out, check that out. I'll let you look at your speeches after you're done. Make sure, see, I've been note-taking for you. But now it's going to have to be up to you to gauge your audience's reactions, okay? Watch how your audience reacts to specific styles of delivery. If you could practice this in front of a group of people before that conference or before something else, you can also incorporate changes and make those, right? But also, on the fly, when you speak, you have to be prepared to understand that you may have to incorporate some changes in your delivery then too. You may find yourself where you've prepared a speech for peers and then you go in and it turns out it's a general audience. And that's what happened to me in Toronto. I had prepared something for peers for people who have done the same kind of research and study that I have. And then I get in there and it's people who have done studies of all kinds of things, right? So then I have to incorporate and make changes so that it can affect a more general audience instead of a specific audience that I was prepared for. You have to be able to do that. And rehearse often, okay? Rehearse as often as you possibly can. The more you rehearse, the better it's gonna be. Don't ever walk away thinking, I got this, it's done, okay? Always, always, always rehearse, okay? Undertake a long-term delivery improvement program, especially if you're talking about a speech that you're going to be delivering often in the future. Always understand that this is always going to be a work in progress. Speech is always going to be a work in progress, okay? It's never going to be finished. It's the same way with an essay. It's like when we write, or how many of you have ever tried to write a story, a novel, any of that stuff? It never feels finished, right? It always feels like there's still something more I could go do. I could say this a different way. I could do that a certain way, and you will do that. It will never be finished. You will do that until the day it is done, until the day you're dead. You'll constantly find something to change about it. But at some point, you're just going to have to stand up and walk away from an essay and say, okay, pushing that off into the world, it's done. That doesn't happen with a speech. The speech the speech from you did 10 years ago is going to be completely different than the speech that you do now, right? It will change. It will become, it's not concrete, right? There are a lot of, when I was an undergraduate, I took a mythology class. And when it came to ancient mythos, when it came to like ancient African tribes resisted writing down their stories. They resisted it because once you did, it became this concrete, fixed thing. They wanted to make sure that they could tell it. They always wanted to tell it because it was supposed to be fluid. It was supposed to be living, and it's still living as it's spoken. Once you write it down, it's fixed. It's done. It can't live more than what it would on that paper. You see what I'm saying? The same thing is going to happen with your speech. It's going to live. It's going to live for as long as you do. It is your speech, and no one can change it or make it any different. We've tried to do this with note taking. We've done this with lectures. Stuart Hall, who is one of Stuart Hall is actually one of my heroes in studies, and he's passed away now, but they have taken his lecture notes and written books about him. And what do you think the saddest thing about that is? What's the bad thing about taking someone's live lecture notes, putting them into a concrete format, and then putting that out to the world? What do you think a detriment is?
It kind of ruins their hard work.
It could. Absolutely. Plato would come along and tell you that, or actually Socrates, not Plato, but Socrates would come along and say, I hate you. You should have never written it down. There was a reason when I was alive, I never wrote anything down. And he vehemently was against ever writing any of his work down. And it was one of his students, Plato, who ended up writing his stuff down and kind of going against the grain there. But Socrates never wanted his things written down, because once it's written down, it takes away that connectivity, that immediacy. You know what I'm saying? It takes away that immediacy, that living embodiment that the speech is. It takes it away, and it becomes a concrete kind of thing. So now Stuart Hall's lecture notes are now placed down in concrete terms in this hard book and all this other stuff. And it's great, right? It's great. I love it, because I wouldn't have been able to experience Stuart Hall any other way, right? So that's the boon. That's the good thing. The good thing is I get to experience someone who was great in that way. The bad thing is now Stuart Hall is no longer here to make that immediate to me. See what I'm saying? He's no longer here to answer questions, to elaborate, to do any of that stuff. It becomes this much more heuristic. I come to terms on my own without his help. Right? So the same thing is going to work with you in your speeches. And the good thing is it's going to live with you for as long as you do. Okay? With different methods of presentation, you have impromptu. Impromptu is going to be when you're asked to speak and you may not have anything rehearsed. This is going to be, off the cuff. This is going to be a kind of speech that you're going to have to give somewhat quickly, right? From a manuscript, this is going to be one that most presidents give. That's going to be coming off of a teleprompter or cue cards or whatever that you can read. You could act natural, you could act stilted, but it just is. Then you have from memory, and this is the one, the Socratic way, I guess you could say. This is the one where you memorize your speech by memory. You go up and you give this speech, and the great thing about that one is that it becomes fluid, it becomes immediate. I can interchange it as necessary. I can adapt on the fly, whatever I need to. And then extemporaneously, all right? Did somebody say something? So effective presentation styles are going to be comfortable, they're going to be consistent, interesting, and they're going to contribute to the content of the speech. They're not just in there just as some kind of irrelevant thing, right? So a way that you can make this presentation more effective is be natural, right? Be natural. Rehearsal breeds this naturalness. So be as natural as possible. Make it conversational to a certain effect, right? Use presentation style to reinforce your message, right? Again, that presentation, that slide, it should only be there to help emphasize what you got going on, not be something to run on its own merit, right? Vary your presentation, right? Don't be predictable and don't be monotonous. Again, go into your speech if you want to, put bold, italics, whatever you want to try to work on inflection and volume and all that good stuff. You want to make it an adventure. You want to make it feel like you are being swept away in what someone is saying. Good speakers can move a person, okay? When you can move a person, you can make people do crazy things. History has shown us this. All right. Dress appropriately, for crying out loud. Avoid hats, hoodies, t-shirts, all that good stuff when you're actually giving a good presentation. Go in and give a presentation in a professional nature. You are reflecting a specific ethos. To build that ethos, you have to have people trust you. People are not going to trust you if you look like you crawled out of a duffel bag. You have to make yourself look ethical, credible, trustworthy. Okay? Be conversational. Again, that's going to come with that natural nature. Be conversational. It shouldn't be me up here just dictating to you. It shouldn't be just me up here reading from a script. It should be it should be conversational. It should be something like we would be talking, in a Walmart or a mall or a parking lot. It should be something of that nature. That natural effectiveness. Be expressive, right? Use gestures, use your hands, use voice, volume, tone, diction. Be expressive. Use your eyebrows, use your eyes, all these things. Avoid common mistakes such as like, all that good stuff. Kimmy, why are you rubbing your head? You do that?
Because I know I'm going to end up doing it.
No, you're going to be fine. Practice, 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 and be as natural as possible, and you got this, right? And use notes appropriately. No overuse of notes, okay? At no point should you constantly be looking down at a notepad. Use notes just to propel you. They should just propel you. They should just make you move on to the next point. They shouldn't be there as a crutch. If you drop those notes in a gutter, you should still be able to get up there and still wing it pretty damn well. Okay? Again, voice, make sure you can manipulate your volume and the rate. Make sure that the inflection, all that stuff is present. You want to make sure that all of this is going on for you, okay? Nothing makes it feel more conversational than the volume and all that good stuff. We all practice this in everyday life. Articulation and pronunciation. If you have a word that you have trouble saying, don't use it, okay? Don't use it. Don't use a word you have trouble. Like I still have to this day, I can't say Abercrombie, right? Anybody ever hear the people Abercrombie and Fitch? Yeah, I can't say it. To this day, I still can't say it, and I don't, and I try to avoid it. You know, people make fun of me all the time about it. I can't say it, and I won't say it. So everybody's got a word. Everybody's got this thing. Avoid it. Avoid it if you can. All right. I'll just say, hey, this clothing manufacturer guy, this designer, you know, that kind of stuff. Avoid it if you can. Other than that, make sure that you do have the proper pronunciations and of whatever you're going to be speaking on. Now, there are going to be some that are, the vernacular is going to be argued about, GIF versus GIF, you know, that kind of stuff. But there are going to be things that you want to make sure that you are putting the right emphasis on the right syllable, right? Make sure when it comes to words, you are pronouncing them the proper way. Yes, I like to say that the English language is always evolving and always changing, but now's not the time to be a renegade. Now is the time to be, you know, someone who can go out and portray a sense of credibility and ethos. You don't want to make that mistake in this speech, okay? So always look and see if there's a word that you're unfamiliar with that you may have trouble pronouncing. Make sure you go and you get some sort of formal pronunciation for it, right? You can do that by Googling it. Sometimes the Google Voice Diction will say it for you, but it might not always be right either. So make sure that you go and you look and break it down by syllable, see what it says, how you might say it, and all that good stuff. When I first got here, everybody said pedagogy. So pedagogy is literally the study of teaching, right? But when I got here, everybody said pedagogy, pedagogy, pedagogy. I said, it's not pedagogy, it's pedagogy. And people looked at me. I was like, no, I don't think so. Well, me and a buddy of mine, Scott, we sat down and he said, Richard, I'm going to put this to rest once and for all. He looked and found that the Latin pronunciation is pedagogy. And he said, I've been saying it wrong this whole time. And I was like, I know. But still, that said, if I were to come here and give a speech, I have to run with what, you know, what the common pronunciation might be, or at least if it's the proper pronunciation. I had right on my side. You know what I'm saying? I had right on my side. Anyway, make sure that you understand what the pronunciation is, how to say it, and what to say, okay? Okay. Errors of omission, errors of substitution, errors of addition, errors of accent, and errors of adding sounds. What do we think about this stuff? What is an error of omission?
They left something out.
They left something out. Let's be specific. What do you say that?
Like they were supposed to do something, but they just didn't correct it. Like, say for example, they didn't like verify their sources.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like making broad claims like leaving out a part of the argument, right? Going out and making this broad claim and saying something like, you are our most valued customer. Bullshit. There's no possibility. Everybody is your customer, right? To say that I am your most valued, that's you're omitting the rest of all your customers, right? What about the rest of your customers? So errors of omission, leaving things out, leaving things unsaid, all right? And it could even fall into when we were talking about the guy with the forest fires, right? When we're talking about there has been this large increase in forest fires this year from last year. Okay, but you're omitting what those specifics are. Is it one more fire? Is it two more fires? You know, that is an error of omission. We want to hear the full story. Give it to us straight. Give us all the information. All right. This is the battle of Fox News and CNN. You see what I'm saying? The battle of omission. We leave out certain portions to inflame our, base. These kinds of things. Errors of substitution. What is that? Maya wants to say something.
I'm thinking that it's probably when you add something in for something else.
Yeah, yeah. When you are substituting something that may not necessarily be substantial, it may not even be. It could be like what is it? Bait and switch, right? What is a bait and switch? So it's substituting something for something that's either unknown or potentially not there, or it could be something of substituting in substituting one thing for another when there's really no relationship with it, right? It's I'm struggling to find an example, but it's taking one thing and putting it in the place of another when it's not necessary or it's unknown. Okay. Errors of addition, when you add things that don't necessarily need to be there. Okay. Things that you could leave out, but you put in anyway. Errors of accent. All right. Things that you may be saying incorrectly. Things that make sure that you are working on the way that you are pronouncing something, that it is pronounced correctly. Errors of adding sounds when none exist. All right, trying to make something sound more flamboyant than it is. So be very careful with this stuff. And sometimes pauses can be effective arguments in and of themselves. Has anybody ever heard the old term, sometimes the things not said make the biggest arguments, make the best arguments? And to use a cliche, and that's true. That's true. Sometimes it's good to just pause. If you have just said some big statement, and I've done this in class where I have said something that I thought was kind of cool or heavy or impactful or whatever, and I'll just let it sit and stew and marinate. That's what I call it. I'll let it marinate. Sorry, I'm on to the whole Letterkenny thing right now. I suggest let it marinate. but it's true. You just let it sit and let it do its thing. Pauses are very effective. Body action, make sure that you're doing eye contact. I know some of you have an issue with shyness, and if that's the case, what do you think some good ideas are that you could try to make it look like you're giving eye contact?
Look slightly above their head.
Absolutely. Look just above their head. Look at the top of their hair, right? Um, Try not to get carried away with it where you're just like looking at the top. Because I mean, sometimes that can be, it looks like you're just staring dead at me. You know what I'm saying? But instead you're doing one of them things and it's really, I'm looking at the top of your hair, but I can't tell because it could be just, you're looking crazy. You know what I'm saying? And does he want to fight me? Is this about to go down? You know, this kind of thing. So make sure that, you know, very eye contact, bounce it around, but make sure that you're looking at the audience. Use facial expressions often, smile when you can, um, inquisitive looks, work on these things. You want to work on this natural feeling, right? When you guys are out and you're talking in, you know, wherever you talk at, I know I've seen some of you guys in the parking lots at the mall or at Walmart or whatever. You're out there and you're talking to people. You never have just a stoic expression. There's always something painted to your face. There's always a painted emotion. Speak with that. Speak with that. If something excites you, raise your eyebrows. Or if something, you know, make sure that your tone and your volume and all that stuff is reflected in your facial expression. Make sure that you're using gestures, hand gestures. Make sure that you are keeping a decent posture. You're not leaning. Uh, you're not, oh God, I got a great example. My first year teaching here. Uh, my first year teaching at Michigan Tech, I remember I was walking around the classroom, acting all cocky, laying my thing down, teaching my class, doing my thing. And, I remember I went and I kind of like leaned up against the desk because they had these big table desks over at Tech, and I sat with just the edge of my behind on it, and I was holding it, and I'm sitting there and I'm talking to the class, and the top of the table just said pop, broke, and I went straight in the floor. Oh my God. Oh my God. Everybody just looking at me. And you know, being sophisticated Michigan Tech students immediately started laughing at me. So I jump up, I start strutting like nothing happened, and I was like, class dismissed. Anyway, afterwards, I remember getting an email, somebody talking about, hey, what happened to the desk in there in this classroom? Who broke it? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know who did that. Because I never wanted to relive that instance in my life. But yeah, you know, that's what you get, Richard. That's what you get for going in and leaning, not using correct posture and all this other crap. So make sure you're not leaning on anything. You're not giving anything using anything as a literal crutch, because I promise you one day it will come back to haunt you. And make sure you're using movement. Don't ever just stick behind a podium. Always move around. People want to be a part of what you're talking about. So if you can, move around. All right. And be prepared to handle audience questions. Right. You probably aren't going to be able to do that if we do this live, if we do your speeches live, like I hope we can on Zoom. I'm hoping we have enough time for questions, right? But a good audience will wait until the end of the speech before they start bringing up any kind of questions. But you will get those impromptu people who can't wait. But typically, you would ask them to wait to the end. And then you always want to have time to answer questions because you're always going to have them. And the great thing about asking questions or having audience questions is that you can adjust your speech in the future to accommodate something that someone may have asked. You may be able to clarify something specifically within the speech itself. Other than that, if there is any good piece of advice that I can give you, right? Try to answer all the questions to the best of your ability. But if someone asks a question you don't know, what do you think you should do?
Maybe give the credibility to them so they can go and look at what they gave as an answer.
Sure, you could do that. Absolutely. Another method that you could probably go and check out is go in and just say, I don't know. Never be afraid when someone asks a question to say, I don't know. I don't know is far and above better than you going and trying to make something up off the cuff. Okay? Don't be afraid to say it. That said, you don't want every answer to the questions you're asked to be, I don't know, either. All right? So make sure that you anticipate as many questions as you possibly can going into this. And that may mean going and asking and giving that speech in front of a couple of family members, whatever. Anticipate the questions to the best of your ability. And when you are asked a question that you do not have an answer for, don't make something up. Just say, I don't know. Okay? Any questions about all that good stuff? Yes, no? So let's talk about criticism. What do you guys think criticism is?
Things that people disagree with.
It could be. Absolutely. Could be something that someone disagrees with. Let's be specific.
It's feedback.
It's feedback. Absolutely. So it's things that people may not agree with. It could be feedback. What else? How about just generally things that may make this better? All right. Criticism is about what can make something better. And it's okay to understand that many may go negatively. As soon as they hear the word criticism, they think it's somebody who doesn't like what I got to say. Yeah, that could be it sometimes, right? But true criticism, constructive criticism, the way criticism was meant to be, criticism is supposed to be something to help build it and make it stronger. It's supposed to be someone coming along and giving you advice. Someone saying, I don't know if that fits this particular spot, or I think maybe you need to elaborate more in this area because I don't quite get that. That's criticism. And that's the way criticism is supposed to be. And then you take that criticism and you work with it and make it better, right? And that's how it's supposed to be. The thing is that when you hit that, and that's what I'm talking about. That's when we hit that culture in criticism, right? Culture in criticism is culture has painted criticism as this very negative thing, right? And it's done it through the media. It's done it through comedians and everybody else. I mean, I listen to podcasts all the time. I listen to Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, and I love that one. And on that one, he actually goes in and says he will not read anything critics write. Right? And a lot of that's got to do on, and that's wrong on both sides. That's wrong on Conan O'Brien's side, and it's wrong on the critics' side. Because the critics have adapted this culture of tearing down for the sake of tearing down, right? But on this other side, you have Conan O'Brien, who is refusing to look at what might be said about him and adapting himself to make it better. Now, on one hand, we applaud that to a certain extent because Conan O'Brien is being himself, and he's made a great living doing it. And I'm not complaining about it. I love it. But as public speakers, as people who are trying to do something the most effective way we can, we have to be able to look at that criticism and then build something off of it. Okay? We do not have the luxury of turning our backs on criticism and saying, I will not read a critic. Okay? You must read that. You must understand it. And you got to have some thick skin going into it because people are going to say things in ways culturally that may offend you, that may not be the nicest way they could have said it, right? So it's about being thick skinned. The great thing about this with public speaking, we can adapt on the fly. When it comes to something that's written, like a textbook or a book or an argument, that could be a little bit difficult. And the reason being, you're not there to physically defend, right? We are there physically to be able to defend what we say. When you've got somebody who has written something, it's not that easy. It's not as easy to defend. And that's what I will typically tell people who write me an essay. Listen, you need to write this in such a way as to, because, and we'll have peer reviews, and I'll say, don't say a word while you're being peer reviewed. Not one word. I want you just sit, listen, and write. And while people are talking, that's all you do. And then when everything is said and done, you don't explain why you did anything. You just say thank you and move along. And the reason why is because you're not going to be able to go in later in that written product and say, this is why I did that, right? It has to live on its own out in a free world and do its thing without you there. Speech is different. We can defend ourselves. We can make that a little bit more fluid, but still you have to understand that cultural aspect of criticism is extremely negative, and it has got this ugly, ugly side to it. Be prepared for it, and you'll see it, but you need to take the high road and use it as a constructive device. Any questions about that? So as public speakers, you are also going to be critics, and you have been in this class. So good ideas for guidelines for criticizing more effectively: stress the positive. All right. Anybody ever hear of the compliment sandwich? You know, that cliche. This is something, well, Kimmy, compliment sandwich is where kind of like you give somebody a good thing, then you say a bad thing that they did, and then end with a good thing. All right. That's the old criticism sandwich there, right? It gives people something good that they started with, give them something to work on, and then it leaves them with something that they feel good about so that they don't hate your face, right? But that's not the way that it should be, right? You do want to stress the positive. Tell somebody, yeah, hey man, you really made this pop. I really like the way you said this. I loved how natural it felt. I love this. Be specific about what that example is going to be. Be objective, like you're looking on the outside, but also don't be afraid to tell them, hey, maybe we need to work on this. And here, don't just say we need to work on this. Maybe if you tried this instead of this, right? Be constructive, right? Give them an idea of how they might be able to correct it. I don't necessarily follow with this specific citation that you use because I don't feel like it's scientifically credible. Do you think maybe you could check out some databases within your institution? Maybe they'll have something a little bit more credible that speaks to this, right? That's constructive. Focus on the behavior that you may have to exhibit and that the behavior that you might get back in return, okay? And try to affect the change you want. And own your criticism, right? If you have been criticized, you have to own it. You have to put on that thick skin. You have to be thick skinned, and you have to say, you're right. You're right. Maybe I didn't use an effective citation, or maybe I didn't use a credible source. Maybe I need to go and dig a little deeper and see what I can find. Thank you for that. I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. Okay? Receiving criticism is one of the hardest things you will ever do in your whole life because we like to be right. We like to do things, and especially if you've put enough work into it. If you spent hours on a speech and then somebody comes along and says, I don't know about this, it's like, who are you? Get out of my face. That's not the way it works, okay? You need to be able to take that criticism because you are in a world of millions and someone is always going to have something that's going to surprise you. Any questions about any of the material we've gone over today? No? Okay. So I'm going to go back on Moodle. I'm going to try and get some stuff that's situated for today. I want to get some stuff to where we can start getting you guys to submit, because I think I'd mentioned you guys submitting possible test speeches, right? Like where you could go in and kind of like submit stuff and we'll peer review it. Did I mention that? Okay, that's okay. Do you guys want something like that? Or are we going to peer review it? Or do you want to just kind of like do something really good and surprise everybody at the end?
Probably just do it at the end because peer
Okay.
review seems kind of weird.
Okay.
Unless
That's fine. The only thing I will ask is that maybe we'll do a draft kind of run through or something, and then I'll go over it myself and go and give it a shot and look at it. Other than that, maybe that's what we'll do. Any other questions?
Did you get my
Concerns? No, ma'am, I did not get your email. What email?
I emailed you a few days ago, and I was just seeing if you could kind of explain a little bit on the outline for me.
Okay.
Because I found like 3 main points. I might do a 4th,
Okay.
but I just want to make sure that you approve them.
That you're on the right path.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Everybody, I suggest that if you have to email me at my Michigan Tech email address. I don't know what's going on with my GoGivic account. I don't know what's happening. Is that what you did, Kimmy? Did you send it to the GoGivic or the Michigan Tech?
Michigan Tech.
I'll have to go and look. Maybe you sent it and it got buried.
Okay.
Try resending it, okay? If you guys don't hear from me within about 24 hours, please send me another email, okay? I don't know is there something going on with the email servers, or it could just be that it gets buried in my email stuff, okay? So just if you don't hear from me in about 24 hours, just email me again.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Do we have a speech due on Thursday? Because you were talking about that at the beginning of class, and I'm kind of confused.
No, because we just said that we were going to do one main one at the end, right?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do that instead.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Stay healthy. Be good. If you need anything, I'm an email away. Let me know what you need.
Okay.
See ya.
See ya.
Yeah.